Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show. My name is Mark Devlin, and this is Scotland's number one politics and chat from an anti-nationalist perspective, coming out live to you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, as well, now called X. I'm here tonight with my co-hosts, Mary Devlin and Mark Zegveldt. How are you both tonight?
Well, I'm very well.
Mark?
Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad.
Right, great. And so what are you going to be talking to us about tonight, Mary?
Well, tonight I'm going to be talking about how, despite the SNP's claims, child poverty has been rising in Scotland again for the last 10 years under Sturgeon and Swinney.
Right, and what have you got for us, Mark?
I'm going to talk about the National Health Service in Scotland and is it in danger of collapsing?
And of course, we're all going to be talking about the upcoming general election. Big news of the day, July 4th is coming sooner than we think. So we'll be back with all that and much more in just a few seconds. Hello and welcome back to the Majority Show. I'm Mark Devlin. I'm here tonight with Mark Zegveldt and Mary Devlin. Our aim is a better Scotland without the toxic nationalism that is strangling Scotland's potential, and we hope that is your aim as well. Let's see what we got here. Always a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages from where many of you are watching tonight.
And remember, sharing is caring. So please share. And the number one thing you can do on YouTube is the likes. We like the likes. And please subscribe to increase our reach at a click of a button.
Very good.
And as usual, I will be dealing with the relentless flow of comments. So please keep them short and snappy, and I will try to put as many up on screen as I can.
Right, okay, well, let's just get started then. Sometimes when we're preparing a show like this, then it seems there isn't much news at all until the Prime Minister decides to announce a general election for July the 4th, Independence Day. Many jokes may be made about that upcoming.
And why couldn't he announce it at 9:30 this morning? Why did he have to wait till like 5 o'clock this evening?
Well, that is quite a good point here. Anyway, so let's just a brief look at the clip.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Right, okay, short, snappy. Well, actually, I thought the speech was a little bit longer than it should have been. I think he should just basically said, we're having an election and we're going to tell you all the great things we've done later, rather than trying to go through them in the rain. With music blaring, things can only get better outside. Seemed a bit of a disaster press conference, Mark. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was, but I take a different view. I think the drowning out with the music is just the left trying to drown out the democracy, because we need to hear the Prime Minister. We all wanted to hear the Prime Minister. Why not just let him speak?
Well, yeah, it's a bit strange that the police didn't actually step in and do that. I mean, but, it certainly has some kind of tragic aspect. A suit, which costs probably more than most people make in a month, being drenched in the rain, but almost feel pity for him as well. But anyway, why do you think that he decided to announce today, Mark?
I think I've always thought, I thought an election might have been in May, and I always thought it wouldn't be later than the end of July.
Right.
I think his party have basically forced this on it. It's about time. I think they couldn't go any further. They have to now. So we need to get the country running again properly. So an election is just the thing we needed.
Yeah, I mean, I read that they basically had decided that they wouldn't be able to give away stuff as much as they thought they might be in the next mini budget or whatever it's called in autumn. And so they're kind of run out of options. The Rwanda's scheme, is it going? Is it going? Is it not? Is there going to be any progress, I suppose, on that, for example, between now and any later date? And I think the media has, I said all along as well, I thought it would be in May or earlier, because the media would at some point say, we've had enough of this, we need to move on as a country and start putting the pressure on. But I didn't quite expect that. I thought they might have been able to hold it a little bit more after they get past May.
Well, this might be the only good news that they think they're going to get with the inflation figures today.
Yes.
So, I think they tried to announce it on the day of good news, and this might be the only one they have.
Well, it's kind of very typical of Sunak to believe that a monetary target, inflation target being reached is the trigger for a general election, when I think most Tory grassroots certainly would be thinking, well, can you not get these illegal crossings stopped? I mean, which I think is the main issue. Now, Mark, you were saying earlier on, just before the show started, that polling does say that the NHS is overall people's biggest priority.
I saw a big UK polling, and it's come out that the number one issue for people at the general election is the NHS, cost of living, the immigration is in there as well, and that is the main issues that people are wanting to talk about and discuss and vote on. And I do think the NHS is, as we're going to speak later on, I do think the NHS is a huge topic, because I don't think we've talked about it enough. I don't think politicians have done enough about the NHS.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it is a huge problem, because people are waiting far too long. They're having to go private, but we will speak about this later.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's so many issues with the NHS. Of course, things are skewed here in Scotland by the constitutional question. I mean, it shouldn't actually be. The constitutional question has been settled, was settled, should have been settled in the referendum 2014. But we still have that going on here. But let's just talk about the Tories for a second. Tories, why? How on earth did they get into such a disastrous state? I mean, basically, going from an 80-seat majority to what appears to be electoral wipeout at this general election. What do you think was the turning point, Mark?
Yeah, I think there's been three big issues in my book. That one is the pandemic. No one saw that coming when they won the 80 majority. Boris had a lot of big ideas that he wanted to implement, and he had to scrap a lot of them because of the pandemic. The amount of money we had to borrow meant he couldn't do some of the things he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Politics really stopped for 2 years because it was all the pandemic, and the whole government concentrated on the pandemic. So I think that had a massive effect. I think the war in Ukraine has also had an effect on energy prices, on living that we've seen, and inflation as well around the world, not just here. But it has become a big issue that the Conservatives have had to concentrate. I do feel sorry for them, because, I think when these things happen, everything else goes out the window. So they're saying, well, they didn't do what they promised. Well, yeah, of course they didn't do what they promised, because the situation changed, and it changed dramatically.
No, well, sure, but politics is the art of managing events, isn't it?
Our viewers seem to think that there's been no confidence votes have been submitted to the 1922 committee. And that's
really, I don't know. I can't see anyone doing a realistic leadership challenge just before, even 6 months before a referendum.
I think it was a no confidence. Yeah.
No, but I mean, why would you do that? Because who's going? Let's just say they did that right now. Then there was a no confidence vote in Sunak, and then who's going to replace him to be the Prime Minister for the next 6 months? Although, in saying that, we have that situation with John Swinney. He's taking the poison chalice on in terms of Scotland. There was two things I think you mentioned, Mark, was a pandemic, Ukraine. Did you have a third one?
The third one is the civil service, and a lot of people talk about this. The
Okay.
civil service that are unelected by anybody have been actively stopping the policies that the Conservatives want to bring through.
Mm-hmm.
They've been an absolute disgrace. And I think that is something going forward that we need to discuss, and something that needs to be sorted out is the civil service at Westminster. But I also think the civil service here that work for Westminster that actively campaign to break up the country. Mm-hmm. by backing the Scottish government. So that's something else that I think that needs to be sorted, is the civil service, because nobody elects the civil service. So they shouldn't be blocking policies and making it difficult for the government that we voted in to do.
I think it's very pervasive. I mean, you have a civil service that is, working. I mean, for example, let's say global warming. They take on all this global warming stuff, right? They put that into all their papers and stuff, but a lot of it hasn't been gone through the Parliament and so on. Or you could say the diversity things as well. So you have to go all through all this diversity stuff to get a job and whatever it is, but it hasn't actually really been done so through the Parliament. So you've got this power group that's actually very subject to these kind of global, I don't like that word too much, but global agendas, or agendas, let's put it another way, agendas that aren't the agenda of the government in power. So it can be a real issue. I don't know if there's an easy fix to that, but we'll maybe leave that for another day. So big question is, will the SNP get booted out on Independence Day? Now, I often say nationalism is an addiction, but it gets to the point where addicts have had enough. Cold turkey, perhaps. They finally see that the drug that is hurting them is hurting them more than they love it. In Scotland, we have 17 years of this nationalist addiction, and perhaps is it time that people are going to turn around and say, no, we had enough. All it's done is brought Scotland down, and these people who claim to care more for Scotland actually are the ones who are destroying it. Mark, do you think they deserve a booting?
Yeah, it's for me, it's game time. It really is. And I think we have the best opportunity we've had in well over 10 years to get to tell the SNP, you are finished in Scotland, you are done. And I think this is the time. And I don't even remember, Mark, at Christmas show, we did predictions, and I predicted we'd lose between 30 and 35 seats. And I still believe that is on course to happen, that they will lose 30 to 35 seats. So that will put them on round about 11 seats or so. And that means they are done. They are done. And it has huge consequences for the party in Scotland. It really does, because they lose a 1.2 million short money. They lose the money that the MPs give them from the pay packet. That is a huge amount of money for a party that's already on the verge of bankruptcy, and have got a campaign for the general election to get through and pay for, and the Holyrood election in about a year. 18
right. Well, Mary,
months.
you were looking at some of the finance issues earlier as well. Do you have any extra things to add to that?
Well, I think didn't the SNP, they reported in their last accounts, I think they were losing about £800,000.
Right.
And they have liabilities of about £250,000. Which I think is to the branch offices, the sub branches, or whatever.
They took all the branch office money, right, to fund their.
So it's unlikely that the branch offices will actually call them on it, but they're actually in a negative position. Mm-hmm. And whereas, for example, Scottish Labour, I know that they've got £500,000 in the bank, and apparently they've been pledged another £500,000. So I don't see what kind of a fight the SNP are going to be able to put up without any money.
Yeah, well,
some people will, of course, donate to them. But.
Well, let's have a look at the polling. Okay, so where are we at here? Polling. Right, most pollsters will tell you that the only poll that really matters is the result on election day, which is coming soon. Anyway, and other ones will say, well, how much are you going to pay us to get the result you want? Yeah. Ipsos. Perhaps. Anyway, this week's YouGov poll from the Sunday Times said that Labour now has a 10-point lead over the SNP. Oops, the wrong one. Hold on. back a second. Where is that? Labour is 10.8. Okay, there. Well, I just said it, but anyway, there it is. And it says that they have 39% vote in Scotland versus 29% for the SNP, with Conservatives on 12%, which would give Scottish Labour having 41 seats, the SNP having 8 seats, Scottish Lib Dems having 5 seats, and Scottish Tories having 3 seats. Although other predictions, more nuanced predictions, will say that Scottish Tories will hold on to their 6 seats and perhaps may even get more seats, with the only place in the UK to do so. Again, an effect of the constitutional question, rather than any effect of the Scottish Tories being better than UK Tories. Well, would you think that would be the case, Mark?
Yeah, I think. I think it's just the SNP of. I think this started when Nicola took the question of the independence and the right to hold the referendum to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, sure.
And lost. Okay. She lost, and it wasn't just a loss; it was an absolute hammering of a loss. You know, what the judge said at the end was devastating for Nicola and for the SNP and for independence. And I think SNP supporters started thinking, and I know this for a fact because I've heard them say it, they started thinking, well, we can't get independence now. There's no chance of getting it. We've lost our last chance. She promised us an independence vote in October. That never happened. That's your last chance. The country's in a complete mess. We're not going to get independence, so we're not going to vote for you. And it started from then, and the downfall has been pretty dramatic since then.
Well, I think they blame her. I mean, certainly if you read Wings Over Scotland and the Alba crowd, they blame Nicola Sturgeon. Some going even as far as saying she's a unionist plant. All this type of nonsense, because that she didn't focus on independence at. For example, after the Brexit referendum, when she said she would, and then she took it to the Supreme Court and they whine about the strategy. But, she didn't have it. The Wings people, they forced her to go to the Supreme Court pretty much. And they forced the de facto referendum nonsense on us. So they're just as culpable in all this as well. The thing was, they wanted to keep kicking the can down the road. And then there wasn't any road. There's just a brick wall. You can't do this anymore. And that was her crime, I suppose, for actually being in the place where she was the last person to kick the can.
Well, Alex Salmond said, and it was a politically really stupid move to make, and it set back independence because it gave the Supreme Court and Westminster to say, right, that is it now. You cannot have a referendum unless we say so. And they couldn't campaign on saying, well, we're just going to have a referendum. They couldn't do that anymore because the Supreme Court, which they went to, told them no.
But I think Salmond is just a chancer in this, really, because he basically saying he would have done the same thing because there was no other option at that point to do that. Now, they might have done it in a slightly different way, perhaps, but the Supreme Court question would have been answered at some point, and it would have had the same result. It's not that difficult. You can go and read the Scotland Act, and it tells you right there. Now, so there is a bit of an elephant in the room, though. If support for the SNP is only 29%, how come independence polling is at 38% in the same poll? Now, this 38% is important because if you actually read the headlines, they will say it was from this YouGov poll in Sunday Times. It will say that the polling is unchanged from the 2014 referendum, with yes on 45 and no on 55. But that doesn't include the don't knows. The don't knows are actually 10%. And that means that there's 38% who are for independence. Now, all these plus these don't knows actually go to. I mean, all the don't knows come from the yes side, right? So that means that
I thought they came from the no side.
No, they've come from the yes side. People who used to want it. That's yes is going down, right? So they're going into the don't knows, which means that they're not yeses anymore. So I mean that it's pretty obvious that if we combine the don't knows with the those who say no, then it becomes a huge amount.
Because in the referendum, wasn't there a lot of don't knows, but then they tended to side on the side of no?
No, there's no don't knows in the referendum. That's the point.
No, but I mean, before the referendum there were.
Right.
And then when they actually had
Yes.
it, the
Yes.
don't knows went to the
Yes.
no side.
Yes, because it's there. It's well in this case slightly different though, because these are people who used to be yes, and then they're coming away as well, and they're coming into the don't knows. Now, as I said, here's the thing: 29% vote for the SNP, but 38% vote for independence. How does that work out, Mark? What's your theory?
I think it depends on what the question is, how the pollsters are putting the question. But I also think if you actually dig deep into these polls, that they are showing that independence is way down the list of priorities of most Scottish people, most people that living in Scotland. Independence is way down the what they're thinking of. They are thinking of the cost of living crisis. They're thinking of the energy prices, the bills. They're thinking of the economy. They're thinking of the jobs and the livelihoods and how much money they're being squeezed by the extra tax they're having to pay in Scotland. These are all bigger issues than what independence is, and these polls are showing that. So I tend to look at them a little bit skeptical and think, well, no, I think independence is a lot lower than what
it kind of represents a dream, right? This is the idea. This is that people have a dream. Oh, Scotland could be independent. Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Whatever. And then, but the actual vote for the SNP, I think, is the reality, right? So when we see their actual vote, when it comes down to this general election, that's the reality of people. Because if you want independence, you're going to vote for the party that's going to give you it, right? Or parties that's going to give you. I was not going to get anywhere in this thing, right? So basically, that's the case.
Neil Lovett has an interesting point. He says, saying yes in a poll right now is a free hit of no consequence. So people are far braver in polls when it's not going to happen.
Yes, well, but I think sadly, yes, too many people are caught up in this Braveheart. Someone mentioned it there. Braveheart syndrome. Scottish independence is a noble thing. And as we went on last week about that, I mean, that just means that they'll give their support to Anglophobic, do-nothing grifters, basically. And they have to realise that. Once they realise that it's not a noble endeavour, the breakup of the UK is a bad thing in its own right, and that this noble pursuit is actually, as I say, a way to get just an avenue. It just lets the door open for all kinds of hideous people to gain power. Then maybe they won't think that in the future. I mean, certainly once the SNP's gone, people are starting to go into their priorities, like, as you say, Mark, NHS, economy, and whatever the other one was, sorry, you had mentioned.
Crisis,
cost of living crisis. Then yeah, sure. Then people, then hopefully can say we'll actually vote for parties that are going to deal with those type of things.
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are people who are saying that the Facebook is frozen.
Oh, really? Well, I don't
Screen
know how to
frozen,
fix
no
it.
sound.
I
don't think we have control over Facebook.
No, we don't have control over that. If you are stuck in any way, just go over to YouTube. YouTube's usually fine.
That was stuck too, but now it seems fine.
Oh, God. Stuck. Well, it's the internet. What can you say? Now, we've got great internet connection here, but it does sometimes go off. Anyway, right. Okay, so we'll be back in a few seconds. We're going to talk more about Labour and tactical voting. Okay, so right, but first, buy a t-shirt. Look at this amazing majority t-shirt here. This is great. It's an ideal time to get yourself majority t-shirt or a mug. And here is a mug here. Actually, these have been flying off the shelves. These abolish. This is the Abolish Holyrood one, not majority one. Anyways, Abolish Holyrood mug. Look at that. Oh, it's fantastic. It's really great. Anyways, you can annoy your friends and annoy your enemies and impress your friends with a mug or a t-shirt or some such thing. Anyway, it's great.
And all the proceeds go to help the show.
Very good. Right, where are we at? Okay, actually, we're going to talk a little bit. Labour's going to win, right? So, Mark, what's your thoughts on Labour winning this?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that they're going to win. It's, are they going to get a majority? That's the big question. And by all accounts, by the polls, they are going to get a majority. But I'm not 100% sure on that, because normally when the campaigns start, it does tighten up, and I do think it will tighten up, and I do think Conservatives won't do as bad as what everybody.
Well, I'm not entirely convinced about that. I know that's a conventional wisdom, but I don't really know what the Tories can do to tighten it up particularly.
Well,
I mean, of course, there's dirty tricks and all that, and we could get a bit intense. But they've had, I mean, how many years of it they've had already? So, Mary, you thought?
Well, my only thought was that I think Keir Starmer has done a very good job of kind of staying in the background and staying boring and not really opening his mouth too much, which I think has been clever, and not saying too much to put people off. But I think he will be forced into saying a lot more, and people will call him on issues coming up to the election. But I don't think it's going to be anywhere near enough to change what the inevitable result is going to be.
Sorry, Mary. I do think the Prime Minister was right when he said that Keir Starmer, as we don't know what he stands for. We don't, because he's always flip-flopping. We don't know what Labour policies are, because they've never really come out with their policies. So now we're going to find out what their policies are, and are people going to be turned off by them, or think, yeah, we think that's maybe a good idea. We don't know that yet, but when we do, I still think people, Conservatives that have said we're leaving the party, they've not done it, not done right, they've not done the promises. I still think they might turn around and say, well, I still don't like Labour, and still vote Conservative when they're saying they're not.
Yeah, well, I think Starmer's job has been over these past months to try and assure Conservative voters that that he's a safe pair of hands, as it were, right, and is not beholden to the left wing and so on. And he's managed to hold off, for example, on some pretty hot button issues, notably Gaza, even the Scottish independence. And gender thing to some extent, but decisions do have to be made, and parties do make decisions. So you're right, that will come to the fore what these policies are, and we're going to have some leaders' debates, I've just realised, as well, which could be quite entertaining. Will the SNP be in those? Probably, as the third major party. Now, I should say that one of the things that's most appealing to this in this whole process is that the SNP will not be the third largest party in the Parliament, which means that we won't have to see Stephen Flynn getting up and flapping his gums every day, as he tried to do today, calling the Prime Minister a fearty, or being feared, for not
calling an election.
Not calling an election. Somewhat poorly timed, but let's have a wee look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I begin by also welcoming the member from South Thanet back to the chamber. He is indeed an inspiration to all of us. Mr. Speaker, speculation is rife, so I think the public deserve a clear answer to a simple question. Does the Prime Minister intend to call a summer general election, or is he feared?
Aye. Mr. Speaker, as I have said repeatedly to him, there is, Mr. Speaker, spoiler alert, there is going to be a general election in the second half of this year, and at that moment, the British people will in fact see the truth about the honourable gentleman opposite me.
Okay, so anyway, that's that. No point in dwelling in that, considering he's already made the announcement. But really, who is actually feared in this matter?
I'll bet Flynn's very feared at the moment.
Well, this is the thing.
As feared can be.
He has, apparently, I asked around, and he has an 8.3% majority in his seat. Has he got
how much? Sorry, Mark.
8.3% majority.
And
judging,
that's current polling. Is that recent polling?
No, that's his actual last. That's his last result.
Okay.
I think you'll find that Flynn's seat is absolutely up for grabs in this election. He could well lose his seat.
Right. Now let's go back a bit, actually, and let's talk about that. We're talking about 8 seats, between 8 and 15 seats at current projections, right? that is an enormous amount to lose. And I mean, what kind of effect does that have? I mean, it just has an enormous effect, not on the party itself, but on any independent supporter and what the movement is such. I mean, where can you come from that? Can they even come back? Now, some people might say, well, Labour came back. They only had one MP in Scotland, Ian Murray. Okay, and now I think they've did someone switch over? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. One or two. Oh no, and then Michael Shanks won as well. So we've got two in Scotland. So they were able to come back. Will the SNP ever be able to come back? In your opinion, Mark?
I find it. I don't. You can't really tell. You don't know. We don't know. We don't know what the future.
That's a good point.
For the SNP on the party, but it's going to take a long, long time for them to come back. It really is. I think it will be a long time, but it ends the independence question for Westminster, because every time they stand up and we get the Blackford's kind of speech of, Scotland decided,
Yes.
we've got all these seats. Scotland has decided. We want a referendum, and they can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Every time they do that, the Prime Minister will just get up and say, "Look, you've got a hammer in. You've lost."
Well, that's one part of it, but I think in long term we're looking at the next election, right? The Holyrood election, 2026, and the knock-on effect. Now we can't say. I mean, as you're right, it's just idle. It's not idle speculation, but speculation nonetheless. That will obviously have a damaging effect. There is a knock-on effect there, because basically what you're going to have is a bunch of people who have switched to Labour, and now they're going to be defending Labour against the SNP, a bit like ex-smokers who have, who are the most virulent anti-smoking people. Right, that's my feeling that they'll be like, we did that, we tried that, we're back to the winning team. What are you doing over there? Come back to the fold, that type of thing. So I think there's going to be a lot of that going on. And then I think all people need to say is about Scottish nationalism as well. What did it give us? It's very easy to say, well, okay, it gave us Salmond, Groper, it gave us Sturgeon arrested, Hamza Yousaf. Gaza nonsense. I mean, this is going to their echoes are going to go on for a long time, I think, and can be used very effectively against any future chances.
Well, when a party in power, and it's been in power for as long as the SNP, when they start to slide, nobody can stop that. Nobody usually stops a political party that's on the slide. You can see it with the Conservatives. Mm-hmm. You can't stop that. Look, you can change your lead. See, the Conservatives kept changing the leader, and the SNP, Humza and that stood up in Parliament saying, "Well, they're done for. They're desperate, changing the leader," and the SNP have done the same. They're changing the leader every couple of months. It seems like. They keep changing the leader because they're getting desperate. They think, well, Sweeney will save us. Now, there's been no bounce. In fact, they've gone backwards under Sweeney, which I thought was hard to do, but they are doing. And then they'll be thinking, well, Sweeney can't do it. Let's get someone young and see if they can energise the party. So they'll change Sweeney, and it'll be just a desperate attempt to save the party. And I don't think they can do it. And I think by the time and it's just my view, by the time the Holyrood elections come round, I think they're going to be in the polls. They're going to be miles behind Labour.
Mm-hmm. So I think they're done for at least a generation.
A real generation, Mary.
Yes, a real generation.
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing is, they could get a charismatic figure to come back and lead them, perhaps. I mean, then again,
yeah, but that's years down the line. I mean, there's no one there at the moment.
Yeah.
There's also a caveat that Labour being in, when Labour win, how well they are running the country as well. If they're doing well and the country's doing well, it's going to be harder for the SNP to win at Holyrood.
Yes.
If things are going wrong in the country and Labour's not doing great,
yes,
the SNP have got.
Then they'll say, well, Labour's just as bad as the Tories. We need to get away from this, and that's the thing you have to be very aware of. But there will be events. of course, that will come up. Who knows what those will be? You'd like to think there won't be any events, but a war comes up, a pandemic comes up, all kinds of nonsense comes up. Okay, final question, pretty much in this segment, is going to be about a hung parliament. We mentioned it briefly before. Now, there are fears that Keir Starmer would try to work with the SNP to get a hung parliament. I don't think that's the case. I mean, you could just work with the Lib Dems, right? And Mark, don't you think?
Yeah. I don't think there's absolutely no chance whatsoever that there'll be any kind of deal, because a deal with SNP at Westminster will only hurt the Labour Party in Scotland. It would decimate. I think it would destroy the Labour Party's rise in Scotland if they do a deal with the SNP. Because how could people vote for them? How could we vote for them to get rid of the SNP when we're doing a deal with them at Westminster? It's not going to happen in my book.
I think so.
No, I think the strategy has been quite good. I think ever since I think the Scottish MPs basically said to Keir Starmer, you have to say absolutely no. There'll be no referendum and no coalitions with them, and they have to that makes it very clear to voters that there's a clear choice about what they're voting for. I mean, basically, if Labour had said, yeah, we'll give you a referendum, then what's the point in voting for Labour? You might as well vote for the SNP then. So, so it doesn't make any sense. So they have to say, you're voting for us to get rid of the Tories. That's what it's about. And, and the cost of that is giving up your dream of independence, really. That's what it is. And was that really a realistic dream at this stage? Not particularly, I don't think. Anyway, now we could talk about tactical voting. We've talked a lot about that. Probably talk more about that with David when David comes back next week. He's the tactical voting guru. But
some of our viewers have been asking us to do a campaign to raise money for billboards for tactical voting.
Sure. So. And certainly we can try and do that in constituencies where it matters. Remember, it does not matter at this point of do Labour deserve your vote? Of course, that's not the question. It's like, do you want to give the SNP a doing? That's what the question is. And so you sometimes have to, do things like that. If you're a Tory voter, you'd have to do that. If you're a Labour voter, well, great, good for you. Please do. It's harder if you're a Labour voter, but it's the same thing.
The greater good.
There is the greater good. Mark, final statement on this.
Voting is absolutely essential in my view. The last election, I thought I was speaking to a Conservative MP, and I said, would you work with Labour? And they said, yes. We actually reached out to Labour and asked them if we could do deals to try and get rid of the SNP, and Labour said no. So I think this election, it's going to have to be us that do it, not the parties. And I do think if you look at Rutherglen, that happened, tactical voting. And sure. I do think you have to put the greater good in, and you have to look at your area and think, who is best to get rid of the SNP? And if it's Labour, I'm sorry, and you're not a Labour supporter, you're just going to have to say, in my view, I'm not telling anyone how to vote, but in my view, you're going to have to say.
Well, I think people are quite open to the message anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Of course, 6 weeks to go. Who knows what's going to happen? There'll be a lot of shenanigans, no doubt, but there will be entertaining things, and at least there will be plenty to talk about. So please do tune into the show every week on Wednesday and get analysis from the anti-nationalist perspective. Excuse me. We'll be back in a second. Mark's going to talk to us about the NHS emergency. Right, but before that, please do drop a like for the show if you are, or subscribe if you can. The likes are the thing that propels us up the algorithm, gets us more viewers, gets us more subscribers. Everything helps. So please, if you can, please do that. Right, Mark, you're up.
Yeah, the NHS. This is quite a personal thing to me at the moment, and it has been for quite a while, and I've been speaking about it for quite a while. The NHS is collapsing, and it really is, especially in Scotland. And I know in England, they have huge problems in England with the NHS. As the UK, the NHS is broken and it needs fixed. and it needs fixed immediately, or we are going to lose the NHS as we know it today. We will lose it. There's the amount of people now that are having to go private is shocking, because they were having to wait years and years and years just for appointments. We're seeing treatment delayed, cancer treatment, cancer waiting lists are getting bigger and bigger. A&E, I was in 4 or 5 weeks ago. People were waiting 16 hours and more, and it was like a war zone. It really does need fixing, and we need radical change now. And I think the health ministers in Scotland, all of them, that's been for the last 10 years, have been an absolute disgrace. All they've done is blame Westminster, blame we're doing better than the UK, we're doing better than the rest of England, and that is it. They're not fixing the problem, and the problem needs radical rethinking of bringing in somebody to look at the health services, look at the health boards, reassess what needs done top to bottom, and then have the power, without government interference, to put in place a system that can work for everybody. It's got nothing to do with how much the budget is. We have one of the best educational budgets, NHS budgets in the world. Billions and billions is pumped into the NHS. It's got nothing to do
incredible, the amount of money.
It's the process. It's the top management. We've got management at the top. Too many management. Not enough nurses and not enough doctors. We have 500 consultants short in Scotland. My dad was actually told by a nurse, head nurse, who had been working 20 years in Dumfries Hospital, and she told me dad, just today, that she's had to make cuts to staff. Now, the cut, she had an assistant. She's had to get rid of her assistant. And my dad said, what about your manager? And she said, last time I saw my manager was 4 months ago.
Right.
I haven't seen one since. And my dad thought, and said to the nurse, well, why don't we get rid of that manager and you keep your assistant that was working on the ward? And the nurse just rolled her eyes and said, that's sensible, but that's too sensible for what.
Right. Yeah, I've thought for a while that basically you need some kind of Manhattan Project, as it were, some kind of royal commission or whatever it is, something where people can has 100 days to create a report and say, this is the problem, these are the main problems, here's the priorities, and these are the things that will get the biggest fixes right now. And it just seems like there's no prescription, let's put it that way, for the NHS. It's like, who's saying how it's going to be fixed? Maybe someone is saying maybe someone's saying that, but I don't see it in the news. I haven't seen it. Right?
Sorry, Mary.
I think a lot of the problems are actually systemic. I mean, there's a shortage, as you said, of doctors and nurses. Now, doctors, of course, have to go through medical school and they have to go through being junior doctors. So it starts right at the university point, where there are not enough doctors' places at universities in Scotland to meet the demand. And a lot of the doctors' places in Scotland have people from England and people from other countries. So what happens in those places when they qualify is that they then go back to England because taxes are lower, or they go back to their home countries. So we're not actually putting enough there aren't actually enough places at the universities to begin with that would actually give us the number of doctors that we need in Scotland. And similar with the nurses as well. A lot of nurses are going abroad. A lot of them are going to Australia now because they get better conditions and so on. And so a lot of these things are going to take years for it to come through the system.
Thing, I'm pretty certain that if you put some decent people in there at a higher level, you can deal with this. I mean, look at Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk went into Twitter and he cut the staff by 50%. And there is basically no difference to the product, right? So that means the 50% and those people were just, what were they doing? Wasting their time, right? Now, this type of level of thinking is what we need to have in the NHS. But the problem is, as soon as anyone says, well, we're going to do cuts on it, people think the service is going to get worse. Well, the service is bad already. So if you can say, look, we can cut and just at least maintain the service, then you can do that. But too many people treat the NHS as a religion. It's like a sacred cow, and this is and they don't want to touch. Oh, you're going to sell off a bit of this, or you're going to do that. Well, no, that's not the thing. You want to improve it. You want to make things better. So how can you do that? Now, if that means people losing their jobs, okay, that's cuts, but that's still going to improve. If that doesn't going to improve people, that's better than the status quo, certainly.
Well, yeah, but we have the health ministers who are not. I don't think they're taking this very seriously. I think they're picking up their pay packet, blaming others, and not really dealing with the issues. We had Humza, who came up with that bizarre idea to get the A&E figures down by just saying send them home, let them go to the doctor, or go to pharmacist, but don't keep them in the A&E. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we've seen for year after year. Health minister after health minister, they're not taking this problem seriously, and we are now at a stage where I believe it is collapsing. And if we don't do anything, we could easily lose the health service for good. That's the way I see it.
Well, I mean, we talked about it before. Your personal experience of going there, and you said that if the politicians actually went there and saw what was going on, and because I'm pretty certain if you're a politician, you go to hospital, you're going to get treated pretty fast. And you're not going to go through the normal system, because basically, what can you imagine that you turn up as an MP and you have to wait 18 hours? That's never going to happen, right? Because that would be all over the papers and stuff. So they get preferential treatment, so they don't see it. So they have to sit in there and see, well, why is this person in pain here sitting for 18 hours? Why are these people in the corridors not being treated and all this? Where are the nurses? Where are the doctors? Why is there only one doctor on here? This is the type of question. You're like, what a minute? Why is this? Why are these people not being treated in the doctor's surgery? Why is everyone getting fobbed off onto A&E? Many, many questions, right? But a lot of these questions, they might not have simple answers, but they have answers.
Well,
right.
But MPs and MSPs all have private health insurance.
Well,
they're not in with the rest of us in the A&E, and there's been an 80% increase in patients paying for private care.
Yes,
because of desperation, all the waiting lists and so on. 80% increase. So basically, it comes down to now that in Scotland, it's a system of can you afford? You'll get treated if you can afford it.
Yes. Well, that's kind of been the case now. What I like to say to that is like, okay, people go, oh no, I want a private system, and whether it's healthcare or education, say, yeah, everyone should have access to it. Don't make it so that if everyone could use their money that they're paying in taxes for their health, then you would get different outcomes. But that's perhaps a step too far at this point. We just need simple things that can improve the situation. And, it's horrible situation when you're stuck in there. I mean, even the idea of having to go to knowing that you have to spend hours, almost a whole day in A&E just to get dealt with. I mean, that's shocking. I mean, that's kind of third world levels, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all over 16 hours, people. And I was sitting there and I was talking to different people, and they were all talking, all as a group in the A&E. And I did think then, if a politician or a health minister was actually here listening to these people who have been there 16 hours plus, and listened to the staff who were absolutely overworked and were struggling with what, with the situation, listen to them, listen to the people, they might have a better understanding of the problems we are facing, and actually might think, well, yeah. And I actually think they should come out and say, look, this is actually beyond us. This is overwhelming and it's beyond us. So we are going to seek help from outside of politics and get some experts in to do a whole review of the health boards, the hospitals, and come up with a plan that gets implemented, whether it takes 6 months to a year to do, I don't know, that's great, as long as it gets done, because we're just going towards oblivion where we're
Well, the
going
whole thing will collapse at some point.
We need more doctors, we need more nurses, and that takes time to
Well,
train
as I
these
said,
people
we
up.
can do simpler fixes in the meantime. Well, very sorry to hear about your personal experience there, Mary, and her
Mark.
family, or our family's been going through something similar, as well as have many families as well. And we can only hope that we've got a single provider of healthcare, so no competition in it at all. So we have to it has to work. It has to work. All right, okay, next, we'll take a wee short break and then we'll be back. Mary's going to talk about child poverty. Right, okay, but before you started, Mary, this is a good time for you, a viewer. If you like what we're talking about and like what we're doing here, please do donate to the majority. It helps keep the show going. We've got running costs and we'd like to do more, actually, more stuff. So if you can, please make a super thanks or super sticker donation on YouTube, or what we really like, if you can do it. No time's so tough, but if you can do it, please do a monthly donation on our website, majority.scot. You can go there and there's a little button on the side of every page that takes you to donation form. Any amount, large or small, is extremely appreciated.
And we will be getting very busy now that the general election is coming up.
true.
There's a lot to do, so we will be heavily fundraising. And we'd appreciate, as Mark says, especially anyone who can become a monthly donor. That really helps.
Great. Now, Mary, you're up then. You're going to talk about child poverty targets.
Well, today John Swinney announced that eradicating child poverty was his most important objective as First Minister, and that the Scottish child payment is estimated to keep 100,000 children in Scotland out of relative poverty this year. But the Scottish Daily Express has investigated the SNP's record on tackling child poverty and said John Swinney's claims are hollow, because official figures from the Office for National Statistics, or ONS as they are known, show that the number of Scottish children living in poverty is at its highest level in 2 decades. Nearly 250,000 children living in families that are struggling below the breadline. That's nearly a quarter of all Scottish children.
Okay.
Are you showing the graph there, Mark?
I didn't show the graph, but okay, let's put the graph in. You can
Well, I made this graph.
Explain what this graph is. Hold on. All right. Okay, there we go. There's the graph there.
So what we can see there is that child poverty basically fell consistently from the start of devolution under Labour and the Lib Dems from 1999 to 2007. It fell by 35%, which is brilliant. And it did continue to fall under the SNP, but then the rate began to climb again from 2013, 2014, during Nicola Sturgeon's time in office with John Swinney as her deputy.
Right.
So these are the two people who have overseen rising child poverty rates in Scotland for the last 10 years.
Right.
Under Nicola Sturgeon, the number of Scottish children living in households with less than the 60% median income rose by a staggering 47%.
Wow.
And the £10 Scottish child payment that was in place didn't do anything to reverse the rising number of kids in poverty. So now they've increased it to £26.70 per child per week, which means that Scotland's social security budget has rose by £1 billion in 2023-2024, from £4 billion to £5 billion, a rise of 25% in 1 year. And it's forecast to rise by another £1 billion every year for the next few years. Now, this is just not sustainable. So I would say that the way to get children out of poverty is to grow the economy, incentivise, not punish, business investment, reduce taxes and create jobs to get people off benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't be going on with a nation where you've got half the people are on benefits and the other half are paying all the taxes.
Well, and not even the other half. I mean, that many people in England, well, not even in England, Wales and the southeast, London and the southeast are paying those taxes. That's really, they're subsidising the
Yes,
whole of the rest of the UK.
Scotland. Scottish taxes cannot pay for what Scotland spends by far. So yes, it's people in the rest of the UK. Their taxes are paying for this. So the next time when they bang on about Scottish, child poverty, just ask why has it been rising for the last 10 years under
Well, they
Sturgeon
always
and
go
Swinney?
on about, this that they're doing the big things for child poverty. They're mitigating the child payment and all this type of stuff as well. But they're mitigating Westminster austerity. But they're not really doing that at all. I mean, it shows you can see the numbers there. It's not good at all.
If you want to get children out of poverty, then get their parents to have good jobs or decent paying jobs.
Where are these jobs?
Not just relying on these child payments and the benefits.
Didn't Sturgeon announce 10 years ago that she was going to get rid of child poverty?
Yeah, that was a big thing. One of the big things.
Well,
that and education, wasn't it?
Swinney's talking today about eradicating it.
It's
Why don't they just concentrate on reducing it? First of all,
it's impossible. You'll never, ever, ever eradicate child poverty. It's like Sturgeon said, we were close to eradicating COVID.
Yes.
It's just impossible to do. I'm sorry. It's a great sentiment and it's a great headline, but that is all it is. It's a headline. It's just for to say, well, look, we're going to do this, but it's impossible. You're never going to get rid of child poverty. You never are. As you say, you can reduce it, you can help, but you'll never get rid of it. But extra child payments, it doesn't work, because how do you know that child is actually going to benefit from that money?
Yeah, that's the other thing as well.
So, just giving them money is not the answer. Throwing money at people is just not the answer. You need to help with reducing bills, help with the cost of living crisis. You got to, like you say, grow the economy. That's the biggest thing. You have to grow the
economy. Yeah. Get people off benefits.
Yes, well, that is number one, but there's no focus really on job creation whatsoever at all.
They've no idea how to do it.
No. Very good segment there, Mary. Well done. According to the viewers chat, you are on fire tonight. So hopefully that's a metaphorical fire, not the real thing. Anyway, things you can do right now to support the show. You can make a donation. Well, we talked about that a minute ago. You can buy a T-shirt or a mug. Fantastic. You should. You really should. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube, or you can tell your friends about us, and you can do all of the above, which makes us feel really loved. It says here, exclamation point, underlined. Coming up, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
I'm not sure loud but that was pretty loud through my headphones. Anyway, I hadn't been paying much attention. So it hasn't been paying much attention to this tainted blood scandal. I don't know if you've been following, but it's yesterday I decided to read up on it, and I was quite shocked by the details. Now, if you don't know much about it, basically from 1970 to 1991, thousands of innocent people were given tainted blood products by the NHS. The scandal was caused because a shortage of blood plasma meant that they had to get import blood products from the US. But in the US, the way it works was they would pay, the blood was donated. You get paid if it was donated. Yeah, it was bought, I suppose. And those people who wanted to get money from that were, let's say, not the highest class people, and were included prostitutes, drug users, and so on. So what happened, of course, was that all kinds of infections went into this blood, was then mixed together and then put into blood products, came over to the UK and was given to unsuspecting folk, many of them children. Anyway, so this has left 30,000 people infected with HIV and hepatitis, and over 3,000 people have died. Many have had their lives shortened. And I was reading through this, and the stories of some families, absolutely horrible. You get these young kids who were given blood to treat haemophilia, and they contracted HIV. And as if that wasn't bad enough, their families were then shunned by society. The kids grew up lonely, didn't have any friends. Neighbours and wider society didn't want to have anything to do with them. I was reading that the family, they had to move and hide the kids' illness because of the shame of it, or not necessarily, but partially the shame and partially the social
Stigma.
Stigma, yeah, stigma is a good word. And then, of course, to make matters worse, their kids died. So when at a young age. Anyway, on Monday, Rishi Sunak described the release of a long-awaited report as a day of shame for the British state and promised comprehensive compensation for those affected. Now, this SNP lady, Amy Callaghan, decided that she would use this as a way to try and make a point about independence. She said, another scandal at the hands of Westminster, another in a very long list. So many lives lost and so many more in tatters. Okay, good so far. It's only with independence we'll be free of Westminster scandals for good. I just don't really know where to start with this. It's first of all, the SNP is completely mired in scandal. Not ordinary scandals that we've got. There's a bunch of medical scandals. There's the Edgemills inquiry. There's the care home deaths inquiry, and there's a whole pandemic nonsense. WhatsApps being deleted, so we don't know what decisions were made and so on. And then, all this happened in the 70s up to the 90s when the SNP barely existed. So, what's it got to do with independence at all? These decisions were all being made years ago. But finally, I suppose, what kind of person uses the deaths of innocent people to make a point about independence? Also, some of these people weren't even Scots. Most of these people weren't even Scots. So it's sick. It's a sick mind that comes up with this kind of thing. And it shows how the sick ideology of independence puts that above everything else, against the lives of ordinary people, any kind of sympathy or concern for the actual victims. Oh yeah, I'm sorry to hear you had a bad time, but independence will make it much better. It's like, we don't need your sales pitch right now. What we need is just the sympathy part. That's it. And if you get into the sympathy with the sales, that means you're not really interested in the sympathy, I think. So for the discussing use of innocent people to try and justify her case to divide the UK further, then I nominate Amy Callaghan, SNP MP for East Dunbartonshire. Shocking. Yeah. I just can't.
They just no self-awareness. They just jump on anything, don't they?
It's as I say, it's disgusting.
It's
it really
bad
is.
Taste.
It's very, very poor taste.
I don't know who thought it was a good idea behind the scenes to think, well, yeah, we'll use this as a political thing to try and put for independence. Who thought that was actually? Who was sitting in the room thinking, yeah, we'll use this, we'll do this?
I know.
Who's the adult in the room that should?
Well, even if it was just a personal, she put it out in her personal account. It's like, what kind of mindset do you have to do to have that? It's just, it's not. It's that,
And she hasn't even deleted it. Before someone from the party might have said, "Hey, get that down, get that."
Actually, there was a thing. Did you read that thing? It was about. Was it someone from Alba? Ash Regan said in something during the week that when she put up a post that was against kind of questioning the policy of the SNP, the SPADs, the special advisors, were on the phone to her straight away to tell her to take it down. Now that that's not the case, that shows that perhaps internal discipline is a bit of a disaster in there. Anyway, she's my Zoomer of the week. Not necessarily a Zoomer, but it's just a disguster, I suppose, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, next up is going to be Mark. All right, so with you in a second.
Mine's a little bit different than normal. I'm going to give it to all the health ministers that we've had over the last 10 years. I'm going to give it to Sturgeon, to Freeman, to Humza, to Matheson, to Gray, all of them for their inaction on saving the health service in Scotland and for why we're at the position we're in today. So mine is going to be all of them as a group, because they've sat there, took the money and done sod all to help with the health service. In fact, they've helped destroy the health service in Scotland to a point where it's close to collapse, and we are the ones that are suffering because of it. And that's why I'm going to give it to all of them as a group, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome to give it to whom you like. It's a typical thing, though, isn't it? It's like the Scottish Health Service has devolved, completely devolved, and yet they can't make it run better. There was a big opportunity to run better, but as I said to someone even just a minute ago, you don't get into nationalism to run things better. That's not how you do it. You get into nationalism to avoid that. The reason that you go, it's someone else's fault. Someone else caused this problem. I'll blame them, and I'll get support that way. You don't get support from running things well if you're a nationalist. That's not what it's about.
No.
As you get support by deflecting it and creating grievance. So the sooner people really understand that, the better. But I mean, this is the thing. I mean, when you read out those names there, Mark, I thought it was like, what a rogues gallery that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you think the standard of them politicians, and you're giving them a multi-billion-pound huge organisation to run, and you think they are the head of that organisation, and you think, oh my God, no wonder we are in the position we're in. Because I don't think it's just a case of they're not trying or anything. I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they're
They're not just they're
anywhere near close.
Yeah.
None of them.
You wouldn't trust them. You wouldn't trust them to run. I don't even know what I would trust them to run. I wouldn't trust them.
A local council?
Not even a council. I mean, they're not even at that level.
Yeah.
Matheson can't even work his iPad properly. So, what
Yeah.
I mean, it's
people like that.
Well, I mean, that's one of the problems of Scottish devolution, the Scottish Parliament, is that, the people in there haven't done any competency tests.
No,
They don't have to pass any
I noticed
tests.
that you mentioned that, Mark, actually, in your post that people on Twitter that you said that there should be a competency test or certain rules for people coming in. I think it's quite good. We could perhaps talk about that at length, maybe in another show. But one of them was people should have more experience before they come into any parliament, some actual work experience, not working in a call centre for a little while or being an accountancy trainee or whatever it is, not nonsense, or some social work. Even, I mean, I'm not saying social work isn't a real job, but actual other work as well. It's a thing, and these people come in to health. What experience do they have running health systems?
It's way beyond them.
None of them have run even a small company. They've never been involved in the private sector, running a company or running a business where you have a lot of employees. Now, you're never going to get at a company that's big as the NHS and.
It's ridiculous. It's huge.
Yes, but at least you can get somebody that has actually got a health background and maybe somebody that's got a business background who knows how to run a company that's got thousands and thousands of people working for you, because these people don't, and I don't think they understand. I don't even think they understand the situation we're in with the health service. I really don't.
They don't. They don't care. I mean, they don't. That's the thing. They're not in it for that. They're not in it to improve it. They're in it to blame somebody else. And that's how they get power, by doing that. Anyway, good luck with you on that one. I think it's quite a strong contender, I have to say. But next up, it's going to be Mary. So hold on a second. Right. Oh, sorry, no, did the wrong thing there. Hold on. Oh, okay. Right. Mary, off you go.
Okay, so my Zoomer of the week is Glasgow City Council for their complete lack of self-awareness. They've been announcing cuts of 450 school teachers at the same time as saying they're searching for ways to send money to Gaza.
All right, okay, very good.
So basically, Glasgow City Council are going to cut 172 teaching posts this year, and a total of 450 over the next 3 years. Parents, teachers and pupils have been staging demonstrations across Glasgow, with one was in Susan Aitken's constituency, and a lot more demonstrations are planned. One of the protest organisers, Leanne Maguire, said, we are the city in Scotland with the highest rates of child poverty. So when you start stripping away something like education, it just paints a very bleak picture for our young people in Glasgow. So this is linking it again to, if we don't educate children properly, then that's another thing that keeps them in poverty going forward. A Glasgow City Council spokeswoman said council officers were considering a range of proposals because they have to save £108 million.
Okay, 108 million. It's quite
I
a
don't
lot.
think just the teachers is going to, I don't think that would come to £108 million somehow. But anyway, so at the same time, Glasgow City Council, the headline was Glasgow City Council is gearing up to find ways to send financial aid to Palestinians in Gaza. SNP councillor Greg Hepburn said the subject is important to all of us across the chamber and speaks to Glasgow's history of looking outwards towards those in great need. Well, Greg, may I suggest that instead of looking outwards, that Glasgow City Council looks inwards and looks after the people that they've been elected to be responsible for before giving away money Glasgow can't afford to Palestinians, money that should be spent on teachers in Glasgow schools and in Glasgow services. And that's why Glasgow City Council are my Zoomers of the week.
Oh, it's very strong here. All right, but it turns out it's Mark Z to decide. So it's challenge. We're saying the people on the chat are saying it's a close call. It's challenging.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think Glasgow Council. When I first read that, I could not believe what I was reading. That's just the optics of giving money away to Palestinian when the council's actually struggling for funds, and that it's just staggering. I'm so out of touch with what people are thinking, and I do think, and it's foreign policy. They shouldn't be interfering.
It's like deal with it. Empty the bins.
Yeah, the council. They're not a government.
No,
that was a good one, Mary. But and I was going to go with mine because I do think it's quite personal to me, and I do think we need. The NHS is struggling, but, and I don't want to do this because I do think Mark's head's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger because he's winning far too many at the moment.
Oh,
On a serious note, I do think Mark is the winner because what we've seen with that blood scandal was an absolute disgrace for the whole of the country, and it's shocking what happened, and to come out straight away and use that politically the way she did, I found that absolutely disgusting. I thought, I didn't think the SNP could get any lower politician, but she proved you can, and she has got lower. So my pick is you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, but
I think that was the worst issue.
It's a terrible. I mean, it's just a shocking thing. That's the woman there. Remember her face anyway. It's terrible. You really. I mean, I didn't know anything about. As I say, I didn't know anything about this issue at all. Not a single thing. And then I started reading this article yesterday, and I was like, "What the hell is this? This is unbelievable!" And just people going in for a blood transfusion, even. And or giving birth and get a blood transfusion or whatever, and then they get infected. The woman who was the top shop lady, Anita Roddick, she was infected with it and died young because of it. And there's other people. There's so many people.
And Davis's mum as well. She came out on Twitter and said her mum was affected.
Right,
yeah. Through this.
So it's a terrible situation. Yeah. It's a win for the Zoomerism, but it's not a win for anyone in this terrible situation. Right, we are so happy to have you all with us on this show every week. Scotland's #1 politics chat. We'll be back next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Thought for the week is, as the expression goes, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So we must not do nothing. We must act, we must vote and tell others to vote so that we can finally beat the cynical politics of Scottish nationalism, drive it out of Scotland and drive out the thinking that is behind it. Thank you all for your support. We will see you all again next week. And huge thanks to Mary and to Mark as well.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for your comments.
Good night.
Right, okay, we'll see you soon.